Get your copy of Fire. It's definitely a must-read. If you enjoy hood books, this one is it. Just like the title of the book, it's officially Fire. Get it on Amazon, paperback or Kindle.
Always trust everyone to be themselves, but trust in the fact that you can see them well. I mean, so it's like, trust. It takes too much energy to not trust someone. I mean, it takes too much energy. You always got to stay 2 steps ahead of them or whatever. Right. But trust them to be them.
Right. To be themselves.
Trust the snake to bite you. Right. Trust the lion to laugh. Trust the thief to steal from you. Like, trust them to be them. Too. But know them when you see them.
Let's go.
Peace. This is The Enemy's Public, and I am Bro.Nasir. I hope everyone is enjoying this very hot Saturday evening. Right now it's thundering and lightning where I'm at. Peace to my brother Talk Your Talk Media and the true daughter of darkness. Thanks for joining me, brother and sister. This evening, I want to cover, can BRICS dethrone the US dollar? First, I want to explain to the families who's listening. If you haven't liked the video, please like on your way in. I want to explain to the family what is BRICS. BRICS is a intergovernmental organization comprising Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, Iran, Egypt, Ethiopia, and the United Arab Emirates, originally identified to highlight investment opportunities, but the group evolved into a actual geopolitical bloc with their governments meeting annually at formal summits and coordinating multilateral policies since 2009. Bilateral relations among BRICS are conducted mainly on the basis of non-interference, equality, and mutual benefit, meaning that everybody will have a stake and everybody would share things equally. No bully pulpit, no bullies involved. The founding countries of Brazil, Russia, India, and China held the first summit in Yekaterinburg in 2009, with South Africa joining the bloc a year later. Iran, Egypt, Ethiopia, and the United Emirates joined the organization on January of this year. Combined, the BRICS members encompass about 30% of the world's land surface. Just imagine that. These countries, they encompass about 30% of the world's land surface and about 45% of the global population. Brazil, Russia, India, and China are among the world's 10 largest countries by population. I mean, if you look at like China and India, their back number population, the back number is larger than the United States total population. Again, Brazil, Russia, India, and China are among the world's 10 largest countries by population, area, and gross domestic product. Nominal and by purchasing power parity. All five initial members, all five initial members are members of the G20 with a combined normal GDP of United States 28 trillion. Just imagine that. The five initial member states are members of the G20 with a combined nominal GDP, gross domestic product of US 28 trillion, about 27% of the gross world product of a total GDP of around a US dollars 57 trillion, 33% of global GDP, and the estimate of US 4.5 trillion in combined foreign reserves. As of 2018, the BRICS are considered the foremost geopolitical rival to the G7 bloc of leading advanced economies implementing competing initiatives such as New Development Bank, the BRICS Contingent Reserve Arrangement, the BRICS Pay, the BRICS Joint Statistical Publication, and the BRICS Basket Reserve Currency. BRICS has received both praise and criticism from numerous commentators. The term BRICS was originally developed in the context of foreign investment strategies. It was introduced in the 2001 publication, Building Better Global Economy. BRICS by then chairman Goldman Sachs asset company Jim O'Neill. The foreign ministers of the initial four BRIC general states met in New York City in September 2006 at the margins of the general debate of the UN Assembly, beginning a series of high-level meetings. A full-scale diplomatic meeting was held in Russia on June 16 of 2009. Greetings to the sister Shan Walker. Now, I have a video presentation. See, the question is, can BRIC dethrone the US dollar? That's the question. I'll share my screen real quick. And get into this. Because Saudi Arabia, they said straight up, they're not renewing the contract that they had with America as far as the oil. They're going to sell oil to who they choose to sell oil to. Prior to that, the United States only sold oil. They only traded with, Saudi Arabia only made their business with the United States. And now they're going to do business with who they choose to do business with. And they're considering the United States a bully. In all actuality, they consider the entire West as bullies. And, I always said, I said it for a long time. I've been saying it, that United States are bullies, and eventually the bully gets jumped by everybody that they've been bullying. I've always said that. And now all these other countries are teaming up and doing business together, and they're not going to include, they don't want to include the West, because usually when the West get involved in something, they want to be, they want it to be a master slave relationship, and they want to have the lion's share of whatever the business is. And that's not dealing, there's no robbery in affairs change. That's what I'm trying to say.
Countries and regional groups are increasingly diversifying away from the US dollar in trade transactions. This trend, known as de-dollarization, aims to reduce dependency on a single currency and promote economic stability by utilizing a mix of currencies. By embracing their own monetary units more prominently, nations seek to lower geopolitical risks and bolster local economies. This evolving landscape is reshaping global trade and finance dynamics, and has the potential to alter the significance of the US dollar in the global economy. In this video, we delve into the recent shifts by various countries towards reducing their reliance on the US dollar in international transactions. We explore the motivations behind these decisions and provide insights into their economic strategies. Furthermore, we analyze the de-dollarization initiatives within the BRICS Plus bloc, focusing on the substantial measures these nations have implemented to broaden the scope of currencies used in global trade. Within BRICS and its expanding network, there is a pronounced emphasis on advancing digital currencies and central bank digital currencies, or CBDCs, as part of their de-dollarization strategy. China has notably made substantial strides with its digital yuan, positioning itself at the forefront of CBDC development and adoption. Russia and India have also initiated pilot projects for their respective digital currencies, while Brazil and South Africa are actively exploring CBDC implementation. This collective endeavor within BRICS underscores a concerted effort to reduce dependency on the US dollar, enhance financial sovereignty, and modernize cross-border transactions using digital financial instruments. Historically, the majority of China's cross-border payments were settled in US dollars. However, this trend began to change significantly in the last decade. By March 2023, for the first time, the share of payments settled in yuan surpassed those in dollars. As of March 2024, over half, 52.9%, of China's international settlements were conducted in yuan, while 42.8% were in dollars. This represents a significant increase from less than 1% of payments being settled in yuan in 2010. China's de-dollarization efforts include several key initiatives. The country has established numerous bilateral currency swap agreements which facilitate trade using local currencies. By early 2024, China had signed currency swap deals with over 40 countries, totaling more than 4 trillion yuan, or $582.3 billion. This network supports the use of the yuan in global trade and reduces reliance on the dollar. In addition to currency swaps, China has actively promoted the yuan in major trade agreements, especially with strategic partners. For example, agreements with countries like Russia, Brazil, and Argentina have enabled these nations to settle trades in yuan. These efforts are part of China's broader Belt and Road Initiative, which aims to expand its economic influence by financing infrastructure projects and facilitating trade in yuan. China has also diversified its reserves by reducing its holdings of U.S. Treasury bonds and increasing its gold reserves. In the first quarter of 2024, China sold a record $53.3 billion worth of U.S. bonds, part of a broader trend of decreasing dollar assets while bolstering gold holdings. Russia has notably ramped up its utilization of the yuan amidst Western sanctions imposed following its actions in Ukraine. This strategic shift has curtailed Russia's access to US dollars and other Western currencies, prompting a transition where over 80% of its trade with China is now settled in rubles and yuan. Additionally, Russia engages in transactions with India using rupees. This move aims to mitigate the economic repercussions of sanctions and bolster financial stability by increasing reliance on local currencies. The surge in yuan-ruble trade represents a significant escalation rising from approximately 30% just 2 years ago, highlighting a broader strategy to diminish dependence on the US dollar in global trade. Brazil is actively pursuing measures to lessen its dependence on the US dollar and foster closer financial ties with China.
All the gangster tactics that the United States use is over because they're not going to do business with someone who has a bully pulpit. And the United States currency is really legal tender for all debts, public and private, fiat money that's backed by nothing but military might. They threaten you, with military might. I can foresee the future of Saudi Arabia becoming, you know, a terrorist country or cell group, because that's the pattern that United States use. Once they do business with somebody and the business either is terminated or it doesn't go how they want it, it's always a terrorist that comes up that the United States has to go and find and kill or bring to so-called justice. And then once they get in that country, they never leave. And they end up robbing that nation of its natural resources.
Both nations have recently signed agreements to facilitate trade settlements in yuan, marking a significant step in diversifying currency usage. This shift is part of President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva's broader strategy to achieve financial autonomy within BRICS and reduce reliance on the US dollar. In March 2023, Brazil and China agreed to trade directly in their respective currencies, bypassing the US dollar. This deal, which allows for the exchange of yuan for reais, aims to streamline trade processes, lower transaction costs, and promote increased bilateral investments. This move is expected to strengthen economic cooperation and trust between the two nations. In 2022, bilateral trade between China and Brazil reached $171.49 billion, a 4.9% year-on-year increase.
Keyword is trust. And when there's fair dealing and when there's a fair exchange, there's no robbery, and that produces trust. When there's no bully pulpit, that produces trust. And it also produces peace and not make a mockery of peace.
Highlighting the growing economic ties. Additionally, the Industrial and Commercial Bank of China, ICBC, has been approved as Brazil's yuan clearing bank, further facilitating yuan-denominated transactions and investments. This development has made yuan the second largest currency in Brazil's foreign reserves after the dollar, indicating a significant shift in the country's foreign currency holdings. President Lula has emerged as a strong advocate within BRICS for conducting trade in national currencies, emphasizing the importance of financial independence from the US dollar. This strategic pivot towards the use of local currencies is expected to optimize transaction costs and settlement times, benefiting both countries economically. These actions underscore Brazil's commitment to strengthening its economic sovereignty and fostering robust bilateral relations with China, marking a significant evolution in the global financial landscape. Let's take a quick pause. Could you do us a favor? If you enjoy our content, please hit the like button. To help even more, leave your thoughts and feedback in the comments. Your engagement helps us grow. Thank you. India has implemented significant measures to enhance the adoption of local currencies and reduce reliance on the US dollar. A major step in this direction has been the agreements with the UAE, which facilitate trade settlements in Indian rupees, INR, and UAE dirhams, AED. This local currency settlement system, LCSS, was established during Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to Abu Dhabi in July 2023. The system covers all current and permitted capital account transactions, enabling exporters and importers to invoice and pay in their respective domestic currencies. This initiative aims to reduce transaction costs and settlement time, promoting financial
Salute to my good brother, Epic Studies. Thanks for tapping in, good brother.
Inclusivity and transparency. India has also opted to conduct trade transactions with Russia in rupees, emphasizing a strategic shift towards using domestic currencies in international trade. This move is part of India's broader strategy to diversify currency usage and strengthen economic autonomy on the global stage. The Reserve Bank of India, RBI, announced a framework for settling global trade in rupees, which is expected to streamline trade with Russia. The agreements with the UAE extend beyond currency settlements. They include the establishment of an Indian Institute of Technology, IIT, Delhi campus in Abu Dhabi, set to offer various academic programs and research centers from January 2024. This collaboration aims to enhance educational and technological cooperation between the two countries. Additionally, the integration of India's
This is what you call cooperation without putting sanctions and embargoes and tariffs and threatening people with military might and trying to be the big dog and getting the lion's share of the sharing. Now, this is what BRICS is trying to do, and they're totally against the West because, in all actuality, this is not what the West is about. Equal share dealing.
Unified Payments Interface, UPI, with the UAE's Instant Payment Platform, IP.
Greetings, respect to Lady Shea Butter. Thanks for tapping in.
IPP will enable fast, convenient, and cost-effective cross-border fund transfers. The linkage of payment and messaging systems, including the RuPay switch and UAS switch, will further facilitate mutual acceptance of domestic cards and processing of card transactions, boosting bilateral financial interactions. These actions mark significant steps in India's strategy to diversify currency usage and enhance its economic independence, fostering stronger economic cooperation and trust between India and its trading partners. South Africa hosts a yuan clearing bank, a crucial step in facilitating trade and financial transactions in Chinese yuan. The agreement to establish a yuan clearing business in South Africa was signed between the South African Reserve Bank, SARB, and the People's Bank of China. This arrangement enables the supervision, oversight, and clearing of yuan transactions within South Africa, thereby supporting bilateral trade and investment flows between the two countries.
So when we go to these other countries and we try to trade US dollars in for the dollars that's of that nation, pretty soon the United States dollars is going to turn to the equivalent of pesos or something. That dollar is backed by nothing and it's going to crash.
China is currently South Africa's largest trading partner, making this development significant for both nations' economic cooperation. Moreover, the usage of the yuan in transactions between South Africa and China has seen substantial growth. According to SWIFT data, over 30% of payments between South Africa and Greater China are now conducted in yuan, a sharp increase from previous years. This rise reflects the strengthening bilateral relations and trade cooperation agreements between the two countries. These actions align with the broader BRICS strategy of promoting financial autonomy by increasing the use of member countries' currencies in international trade, thereby reducing dependency on the US dollar and enhancing economic resilience. Egypt is taking significant steps to diversify its borrowing sources and reduce its reliance on the US dollar. A key part of this strategy has been the issuance of panda bonds, which are yuan-denominated bonds sold in the Chinese market. In October 2023, Egypt successfully issued panda bonds worth 3.5 billion yuan, approximately $479 million. These bonds were issued at a favorable interest rate of 3.5% annually over a 3-year period. The bonds have been well received, reflecting strong interest from Chinese investors, and have helped Egypt secure financing at a lower cost compared to dollar-denominated debt. In addition to issuing panda bonds, Egypt uses the yuan for some trade settlements. This aligns with its efforts to strengthen economic ties with China and diversify its currency usage in international transactions. The United Arab Emirates has significantly strengthened its financial and trade ties with China by signing agreements to settle trade payments in yuan, including crucial.
Wow, look at that structure. I think that's the Burj Khalifa. No, Burj Khalifa is in Dubai. But that's a beautiful structure. I would love to go to either Dubai or the United Arab Emirates.
Energy transactions. This strategic move aligns with the UAE's broader goal of diversifying its currency use and reducing reliance on the US dollar. In a historic transaction, China conducted its first yuan-settled energy deal involving 65,000 tons of Emirati liquefied natural gas. This deal was executed through the Shanghai Petroleum and Natural Gas Exchange and marks a critical step in using the yuan for major trade deals, thus challenging the dominance of the dollar in energy transactions. The UAE and China have also signed several other agreements to enhance bilateral trade and investment. In recent years, bilateral trade between the two countries has grown significantly, with the UAE becoming
Bilateral.
China's largest trading partner in the Arab world. In 2022, the bilateral trade volume reached $69.2 billion, and both nations are working towards a target of $200 billion by 2030. Saudi Arabia is actively exploring alternatives to the US dollar for its oil sales and other trade transactions. This strategic shift is aimed at
Now, this is the part right here. Saudi Arabia is a part of BRICS, and this right here could really crash the economy. This part right here.
diversifying currency usage in international trade and enhancing economic ties with China. Saudi Arabia, the world's largest oil exporter, has been in discussions with Chinese officials to conduct some of its oil trade in yuan instead of dollars. This potential move is part of a broader effort to reduce the kingdom's reliance on the dollar and to strengthen its trading relationship with China, the largest importer of Saudi oil. Despite extensive U.S. sanctions aimed at curbing its oil exports, Iran continues to sell significant amounts of oil to China. In fact, China is the primary buyer of Iranian oil, accounting for around 90% of Iran's oil exports. This trade
Do we realize what sanctions do to countries and people of that country? To tell you that you can't do business with certain people, that is wicked.
is frequently settled in yuan, bypassing the US dollar and mitigating the impact of sanctions. Iran has developed sophisticated methods to maintain and even increase its oil exports to China. These methods include using a fleet of tankers that operate outside of standard maritime regulations to avoid detection and sanctions. Payments for this oil are often made in yuan through smaller Chinese banks, further avoiding the US financial system. In 2023, a significant portion of global oil trade was conducted in currencies other than the US dollar, with Iran playing a notable role in this trend. By accepting yuan for its oil, Iran not only secures a stable revenue stream but also strengthens its financial ties with China, helping to sustain its economy amidst international sanctions. Trade between Ethiopia and China has been substantial, with the total
Now, for 50 years, 1974 to 2024, Saudi Arabia only traded with the United States as far as the oil, and they probably is getting cheap as hell too, and didn't want Saudi Arabia doing business with nobody else, and being the big bully all over the world, want to be the world police and want to be the big bully, and the standard of the dollar is not backed by nothing. So they was giving them the oil, trading with fiat money. It's like going and giving them monopoly money.
total trade volume reaching approximately $4.3 billion in 2019. Ethiopia primarily exports commodities such as coffee, oilseeds, and textiles to China. The demand for Ethiopian coffee and oilseeds has been steadily increasing in China, contributing significantly to Ethiopia's export revenue. China has been actively promoting the use of the yuan in its trade dealings with African countries, including Ethiopia. This promotion is part of China's broader strategy to internationalize its currency and challenge the dominance of the US dollar in global trade. Initiatives such as the Belt and Road Initiative have facilitated greater financial cooperation, with Ethiopia benefiting from Chinese investments in infrastructure and industrial sectors. Qatar has been strengthening its financial ties with China, evidenced by agreements to use the yuan for trade. In 2023, trade between Qatar and China reached QR 80 billion, approximately $21.98 billion, making China Qatar's largest trading partner. A significant part of this relationship includes the long-term LNG supply agreements where China National Petroleum Corporation, CNPC, and Sinopec have signed deals with Qatar Energy to purchase millions of tons of LNG annually. These deals are part of Qatar's strategy to enhance economic cooperation with China and reduce reliance on the dollar. Oman has engaged in UN trade agreements as part of its strategy to diversify currency use in trade. This move aligns with broader use dependency on the dollar. Oman is part of the Gulf Cooperation Council, GCC countries, that have been increasingly using the UN for cross-border trade settlements. Bahrain is participating in UN-based trade agreements to diversify its financial practices and reduce exposure to dollar volatility. This move supports Bahrain's strategy to enhance financial cooperation with China, aligning with regional trends towards financial diversification. Kuwait has also adopted the yuan for some trade settlements as part of its efforts to diversify currency use and reduce dependency on the dollar. This strategic shift is aimed at enhancing financial stability and strengthening economic ties with China, reflecting a broader regional trend towards de-dollarization. Malaysia is increasing yuan-denominated transactions to strengthen its economic ties with China and diversify its currency use. This strategy aims to reduce reliance on the dollar and enhance financial cooperation with China, reflecting Malaysia's
Sweet Texas, salute, peace. Thanks for tapping in, fam.
proactive approach to managing currency risks and fostering economic growth. Thailand has relaxed rules on yuan use for trade, promoting local currency use and financial stability. This move is part of a broader strategy to enhance economic cooperation with China and reduce reliance on the dollar, thereby supporting Thailand's economic diversification efforts. Kenya is considering issuing panda bonds and increasing yuan use to diversify its financial transactions and reduce dollar dependency. This strategic shift aims to enhance financial stability and strengthen economic ties with China, following the trend of increasing yuan use in Africa. Zambia has established a yuan clearing bank and promotes the yuan's use in trade to support local and regional trade in yuan. This move is part of a broader strategy to enhance financial stability and reduce reliance on the dollar, supporting Zambia's economic objectives. Bangladesh uses the yuan for trade settlements as part of its strategy to strengthen economic cooperation with China. This move aims to diversify currency use and reduce dependency on the dollar, aligning with Bangladesh's broader economic goals. Indonesia is increasing yuan use for trade to enhance its trade relations with China. This strategic shift supports the country's efforts to diversify currency use and reduce reliance on the dollar, reflecting Indonesia's approach to financial risk management and economic stability. Singapore is active in yuan-denominated transactions to facilitate financial transactions in the region. This move is part of a broader strategy to enhance economic cooperation with China and diversify currency use, supporting Singapore's role as a global financial hub. Britain has significant yuan transactions as part of its strategy to promote financial services and trade. This move supports efforts to diversify currency use and strengthen economic ties with China, reflecting the UK's financial sector's adaptability and global orientation. Germany has seen a substantial increase in yuan use to diversify financial transactions and strengthen economic ties with China. This strategic shift aims to reduce reliance on the dollar and enhance financial cooperation, supporting Germany's robust trade and economic framework. Canada has increased yuan payments as part of its efforts to enhance financial and trade relations with China. This move supports the country's strategy to diversify currency use and reduce dependency on the dollar, reflecting Canada's proactive financial management. Sweden has experienced a major rise in yuan-denominated payments to diversify currency use in financial transactions. This strategic shift aims to enhance financial stability and strengthen economic ties with China, supporting Sweden's economic resilience and adaptability. Argentina uses the yuan for trade settlements as part of its strategy to strengthen financial cooperation.
Western dominance is on its way out. It is on its way out, and the rest of the world is not having it no more.
With China and reduce dollar dependency. This move supports efforts to diversify currency use and enhance economic stability, reflecting Argentina's approach to managing economic risks and fostering growth. Venezuela is engaged in trade agreements involving the yuan to reduce dependency on the US dollar. This strategic shift aims to enhance financial stability and strengthen economic ties with China, supporting Venezuela's efforts to navigate economic challenges and sanctions. These countries' efforts to use the yuan in trade settlements or investments reflect a significant shift towards de-dollarization, driven by geopolitical and economic considerations, and supported by strategic agreements and infrastructure developments.
Now, what is BRICS, which aims to end Western dominance? We're going to give an explanation of what is BRICS. I know I gave it, but I have a video that explains it also.
They are richer than the G7 club with 1/3 of the world's GDP. They want to create an alternative to the global order unfairly dominated by the West since World War II. They are currently meeting in Russia for the first time with 10 members. So, what is BRICS? The BRIC acronym was coined by a Goldman Sachs economist in 2001 to describe Brazil, Russia, India, and China as the economies predicted to dominate the world by 2050. The bloc's first summit was held in 2009 to provide greater representation of non-Western countries in international financial institutions and support India and Brazil in their call for a greater role at the UN. 2 years later, South Africa joined the club and it became BRICS. In 2023, for the first time in more than 10 years, BRICS admitted new members: Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE. Argentina was also accepted, but the country's far-right leader Javier Milei refused to join. The bloc is now sometimes called BRICS Plus. More than 30 states have since expressed interest in joining the coalition, including Cameroon, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Thailand, and Venezuela. This year, Russia invited 15 non-members, including Turkey, to take part in the summit. The club now accounts for more than 45% of the world's population and 32% of the global GDP, compared to the G7, which accounts for 30%. Among their goals, create a more inclusive multilateral order for the global south, use more local currencies rather than the US dollar for global trade, develop a BRICS bank to replace the IMF and the World Bank, institutions they see as continuing Western neoliberal and colonial ambitions by imposing strict development conditions on loans. But some alliance members are locked in bitter disputes. India and China are still fighting around the Himalayan border. Egypt and Ethiopia are arguing over a dam in the Nile, and Iran and Saudi Arabia are competing over regional leadership. The group is now a disparate mix, with some members being close to the US and others opposed to the West. The coherence and effectiveness of the bloc will be tested in October this year when Russia hosts BRICS leaders.
Now we're gonna go to Saudi Arabia, who joined BRICS, and we're gonna talk about Saudi Arabia's currency. They joined the BRICS project.
Project M-Bridge is a collaborative initiative involving the Bank for International Settlements, also known as BIS, and several central banks. It's aimed at developing a multi-CBDC or central bank digital currency platform. The main participants in this groundbreaking project include the People's Bank of China through its Digital Currency Institute, the Hong Kong Monetary Authority, the Bank of Thailand, the Central Bank of the United Arab Emirates, and the Saudi Central Bank, which has recently joined as a full participant. In addition to these primary participants, there are over 26 observing members, including prominent financial institutions and central banks from around the world. Some of these include the International Monetary Fund, or IMF, the World Bank, the European Central Bank, and central banks from countries like Norway, France, Italy, and South Korea. The project aims to create a platform that leverages distributed ledger technology, or DLT, to enable instant, cost-effective, and secure cross-border payments and settlements. By using digital versions of national currencies, the M-Bridge platform intends to address inefficiencies in the current cross-border payment systems, such as high costs, slow speeds, and operational complexities. Overall, Project M-Bridge represents a significant step towards modernizing the global financial system and improving financial inclusion through the use of cutting-edge digital technologies. What exactly is M-Bridge in simple terms? Let's break down the concept in an easy-to-understand way. Imagine you live in the United States and want to send money to a friend in Thailand. Traditionally, this process might involve multiple banks, currency conversions, and fees, taking several days to complete. Without M-Bridge, you go to your local bank in the US and send money. The US bank contacts an intermediary bank that handles international transactions. The intermediary bank contacts a Thai bank. The Thai bank finally deposits the money into your friend's account. Each step may involve fees and take time, possibly several days. However, with M-Bridge, you use a digital version of the US dollar, a CBDC, to send money directly to your friend's Thai digital wallet. The transaction is processed using a digital version of the Thai baht, Thailand's CBDC. The money is received almost instantly with minimal fees since it bypasses intermediary banks. You could think of M-Bridge like a high-speed train network between countries. Traditionally, sending a package or money required trucks or banks to drive through various tolls and checkpoints or intermediary banks, which took time and money. With M-Bridge,
Peace to the good brother, Big Dog, Philly OG. Thank you for tapping in, brother.
it's like putting the package on a bullet train or CBDCs that goes straight to the destination with no stops, making the delivery much faster and cheaper. Benefits of M-Bridge include transactions that happen almost in real time. Lower fees since there are fewer intermediaries. Simplified process without multiple banks involved. Additionally, using blockchain technology can make transactions more secure and transparent. Let's take a quick pause. Could you do us a favor? If you enjoy our content, please hit the like button. To help even more, leave your thoughts and feedback in the comments. Your engagement helps us grow. Thank you. The M-Bridge project has made significant progress in 2024, reaching the minimum viable product, MVP stage. This marks a crucial milestone, enabling real-time peer-to-peer cross-border payments and foreign exchange transactions using central bank digital currencies, CBDCs. Here are some key updates. Expansion of participants. Saudi Arabia has joined the project as a full participant, adding to the initial group, which includes the People's Bank of China, Hong Kong Monetary Authority, Bank of Thailand, and the Central Bank of the United Arab Emirates. Additionally, there are over 26 observing members, including the European Central Bank, International Monetary Fund, and central banks from countries like Norway, France, and South Korea. The project uses the custom-built M-Bridge Ledger, a blockchain platform designed specifically for central banks. It supports
Straight up power moves to end Western dominance and end all the sanction and all the embargoes, equal trading all over the world. Equal trading, equal dealing. I know the West is not with that, but this is what's going on.
Supports real-time transactions and is compatible with the Ethereum virtual machine, allowing for the integration of new technology solutions and use cases. Pilot projects. Recent pilot projects have involved real value transactions among commercial banks, totaling over $22 million. These pilots have demonstrated the platform's ability to handle significant transaction volumes and provided valuable insights for further development. The project continues.
Indeed, the Middle East have all the gold. They have all the oil. They have the sweetest crude oil. Actually, they said the sweetest crude oil was in Libya, but all the rest of the oil has the sweetest crude also. And if they just stop dealing and doing business with the West, that's going to hurt. It's going to hurt. Now, we're going to really need these electric cars then if they stop doing business with the West. We're going to need those electric cars then.
Continues to attract international interest with new participants and observers from around the world. This broad participation underscores the global importance of improving cross-border payment systems and the role of CBDCs in achieving this goal. BRICS use of M-Bridge. The BRICS nations stand to benefit significantly from the mBridge project, which aims to create a more efficient and cost-effective cross-border payment system using central bank digital currencies, CBDCs. Here are some of the key benefits and factual insights. BRICS countries have been actively seeking alternatives to mitigate the influence of Western financial systems. By using mBridge, these nations can bypass SWIFT, which has often been used as a tool for geopolitical leverage. This move is particularly significant given that the combined economic output of BRICS countries was projected to reach 23% of the global economy in 2023. The current financial architecture allows for the imposition of unilateral sanctions, which can significantly hinder economic activities. By adopting mBridge, BRICS countries can create a financial ecosystem that is less susceptible to such restrictions. For instance, Russia's Ministry of Finance has highlighted the need for a multilateral digital settlement platform to counteract the economic pressure exerted through current payment system. Do
you know, in order to be a member of BRICS, it requires a sanction ban. You can't put sanctions on people. You can't starve a country. They don't allow it in BRICS. That's the requirement of joining it. If you got sanctions on people, you got to release them. You can't sanction people. They don't want to starve no country out.
The mBridge platform facilitates more efficient cross-border transactions using central bank digital currencies, CBDCs. This system not only reduces transaction costs but also enhances financial inclusion, especially in regions where traditional banking infrastructure is limited. For developing countries within the BRICS framework, this can mean greater access to international markets and improved economic resilience. The inclusion of new members such as Saudi Arabia, Iran, and the UAE into BRICS extends the bloc's influence and strengthens its financial infrastructure. This expansion supports the use of local currencies for trade, reducing the dominance of the US dollar, and fostering closer economic cooperation among member states. This realignment can lead to a more balanced and multipolar global economic order. The platform aims to include populations previously underserved by traditional financial systems.
Exactly.
With a significant number of developing countries exploring CBDCs, mBridge provides a pathway to enhance financial access and inclusion, allowing more people to participate in the formal economy. By using local currencies for international trade and financial transactions, mBridge helps stabilize local economies and reduce dependency on dominant foreign currencies. This shift can lead to greater economic resilience and empowerment of local communities. Strengthening BRICS. Cooperation ***. The involvement of BRICS countries in mBridge, especially China and Russia, underscores their commitment to promoting innovative financial solutions and enhancing South-South cooperation. This initiative aligns with the broader goals of BRICS to establish a more balanced global economic order. Significant economic contributions ***. BRICS countries represent a substantial portion of the world's economy. The combined economic output of BRICS nations is projected to be around 23% of the global economy.
Lady Shay, I would have to do my research on the CBDC's new wave of fair trade and currency. I would have to do my research and get back to that. Once I do my research on that, hey, perhaps I'll present it. Thanks for the information, though.
Economy. This economic clout can be further leveraged through collaborative financial platforms like mBridge, which can enhance trade and investment flows among member states. That's all for this video. Thank you for watching this video. We sincerely appreciate you joining us today. If our content...
Now, we're going to ask, can BRICS dethrone the US dollar? Can BRICS dethrone the US dollar?
Periodically, talk of ways to reduce or eliminate dependence on the US dollar pop up in varied economies globally. The latest comes from the BRICS nations, who have announced their intention to create a gold-backed BRICS currency. BRICS is the acronym for a group of countries started in 2010 by Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. The alliance expects to expand its membership soon, with over 20 countries formally asking to join BRICS, making the group economically formidable. However, the stability, confidence, and economic dominance of the dollar are unmatched in history. The United States has a solid legal and institutional framework that fosters trust and confidence in the dollar. The U.S. has the world's deepest and most liquid financial markets, allowing nations to hold and transact large amounts of U.S. dollars with minimal impact on the dollar's value. Transitioning from the dollar to another reserve currency would be long, complex, and risky. It would require a consensus among many nations and could lead to economic instability during any transition.
Why so many countries are abandoning the dollar? That's the good question. And
just looking at the recent headlines is enough to make an American have a panic attack. The dollar is done, says one story. A post-dollar world is coming, says another. And perhaps the most fear-inducing headline was, end of dollar dominance will also spell demise of U.S. hegemony. But before you go cashing in your dollars for old brass buttons and pieces of used string, you should probably hear what we've got to say about that. We'll get to the analysis part soon, but first let's have a look at why some countries have indeed been giving the dollar the cold shoulder as of late. The term we use for this economic phenomenon is de-dollarization. The same thing happened to the British pound at the start of the last century. As many of you know, the UK's superpower status took a hit after the First World War, when its economy shrunk, fighting what it perceived as...
Exactly. The British pound is already done. That whole way of thinking, that whole way of trading is done.
The globally ambitious upstart nation of Germany. As this happened, the British pound sterling as a reserve currency was gradually replaced with the US dollar. The USA came out of World War I in relatively good shape, and after the World War that followed, the US was even stronger, both politically and economically. In 1944, the Bretton Woods Agreement was signed, in which participating nations agreed their currencies would be pegged to the dollar. The dollar was then pegged to gold at a fixed rate. This meant that countries could trade together with a sense of confidence in the stability of each other's currency. It meant that they wouldn't get into currency wars, wherein a country might purposefully devalue its own currency for an advantage in trade. In short, the agreement was made to make the global economy stable. The International Monetary Fund was created for more stability, to give countries financial assistance if they needed it. After the chaos of the World War, such stability was a good thing. But of course, the fact the reserve currency was the dollar was also a very good thing for the USA. The dollar became the king of the economic jungle as the USA roared through the 20th century, often doing whatever the hell it wanted with significant economic and geopolitical advantages compared to other nations.
It became the king through violence. It became the king through military might and gangster tactics. That's how the dollar became the king, because it's not backed by anything. The Federal Reserve is printing money that's backed by nothing. And the Federal Reserve is not even a United States agency, the Federal Reserve. They're just printing money. See, all these debts that the United States owe, they just print money and say, okay, you're going to accept this money. And if you don't accept it, you know what's going to happen. We'll start with our propaganda machine saying that you have terrorists in your country. And whatever we want in that country, we'll justify it by looking for your terrorist. I see the pattern.
The dollar was in demand. Everyone needed the dollar, and the U.S. controlled it.
Salute to my brother and comrade Killswitch. Thanks for tapping in, good brother.
Because of that, the U.S. was able to exert influence on other countries. Having the reserve currency also gave the U.S. trade advantages. There's also something called seigniorage, which in short means the U.S. made money from the production of money, since the cost of making it was less than what it was worth. It costs less than $10 to make $10, and everyone wants or needs.
Exactly. It costs the same amount of money to make a $1 bill as it costs to make $1 million bill. You just change the damn modes and it's okay, we're printing ones, now we're printing fives, now we're printing tens, now 20s, all the way up to $1 million. It costs the same amount. It's backed by nothing besides military might.
It's the bucks. Cha-ching. This is a very basic explanation, but all you really need to know is when the dollar became the world's reserve currency, that suited the US just fine. The US doesn't want this to change, but other nations have recently been saying that they have been exchanging their dollars for gold at an astonishing rate and also refusing to do certain trades in the dollar. The question is, why? Let's also give you some examples. In 2023, Saudi Arabia's finance minister Mohammed Al-Jadaan shocked the world when he said his country was open to doing oil deals in other currencies besides the dollar. This oil-rich nation had been trading its oil in dollars for 48 years.
Yep.
This really was a big story, and there are a few things to consider. China is one of them. Due to China buying about 1/4 of all Saudi Arabia's oil exports, China is Saudi's largest.
You know the United States don't like that. Saudi Arabia is doing business with China after 48 years of doing business with the United States exclusively. You know they don't like that.
Largest trading partner. The countries have been close for a long time. But it seems they're becoming even closer these days, just as Saudi Arabia's relationship with the US has been somewhat strained at times. Importantly, Saudi Arabia is also a big part of China's Belt and Road Initiative, a multi-billion-dollar, maybe $1 trillion global development project that gives China tremendous influence around the world. This will help Saudi Arabia, heavily reliant on its oil exports, to diversify its economy. That will be needed when the world is less reliant on oil. These countries need each other. The two countries just made a deal in which state-owned Saudi Aramco will acquire a 10% share in the Chinese oil refiner Rongsheng Petrochemical for $3.6 billion. At that same time, the former will provide 480,000 barrels a day of crude oil to Rongsheng's refinery for 2 decades. The small print on the deal doesn't really matter for this video, but what does matter is China and Saudi Arabia are getting closer, and it also matters that they're talking about doing deals in yuan, not dollar.
They're doing deals where nobody gets robbed. Equal sharing, equal dealing. And that way there's no bad blood and it's going to be peace as opposed to being threatened to do it this way, or you're going to be in bad standing, or we'll put a sanction on you, or the foreign policy change with that particular nation. This is equal dealing. There's no robbery in affairs change.
What was even more surprising in 2023 was China mediating between Iran and Saudi Arabia, two countries that certainly have not seen eye to eye for a long time. China is brokering deals in the Middle East, while the U.S.'s relationship with many countries in the
Salute, Ghetto Child Clinic. Thanks for tapping in, family.
Region has been quite touch and go. Some people have even talked about a post-American Gulf. These nations may want to diversify their economies as the U.S. primes itself for conflicts with China and Russia. They aren't playing ball with the U.S., and the U.S. controls the world's reserve currency, so it makes sense to forego using that currency. As we said, because the U.S. holds the world's reserve currency, it can exploit its position. The word generally used is weaponize the dollar, which seems to be motivating countries to trade in other currencies. The U.S. can implement sanctions,
which is exactly what they did for a long time, weaponizing the dollar. For a long time, the U.S. dollar was weaponized
on countries, as we've seen with Russia. It can devalue its own currency to win trade wars, but this might harm.
And they weaponize the dollar with exactly what they're showing on the screen. They weaponize the dollar with sanctions, tariffs, and embargoes. And they'll starve a country if that country is not doing the type of business that they want to do. When you see all these poor countries and everything, these poor countries, because they have commodities in that country, rich in certain commodities in certain countries. But the fact that the United States say, well, if you do business with us and do business with them, or you do business with a country we're not in good standing with, we're not going to protect you militarily, because some of these countries don't have military and the United States protects them. You know, the same gangster shit they do on the streets. Businesses is paying for protection. The United States actually does that.
Arm the rest of the world. Again, it might make sense to dump the dollar for some nations. This is exactly what China has been saying, that the US has been weaponizing their dollar. It's less a weapon, of course, if countries use it less. The more deals are done in other currencies, such as the Chinese yuan, the less the greenback is like paper kryptonite. It loses its power. To some countries, the US is acting a little roguish, abusing its position as the country with the global reserve currency. For instance, it was able to freeze $300 billion of the Russian central bank's foreign exchange reserves when Russia invaded Ukraine. While the US has the full support of many nations, it doesn't in other nations, even if they think Putin's invasion was wrong and what's happening in Ukraine is a terrible thing. Many countries believe this is a proxy war, and the US, a bully to some nations, just flexed its muscles and ignored a rules-based international financial system. This made them worried. They might now be thinking, so every time the US feels like it can just freeze reserves? Some critics have talked about how this has undermined the US's international credibility. What if they refuse to do as the US asks? What'll happen to them? Countries are suffering because of what's going on in Ukraine, but some of them, especially in the global south and the Middle East, are skeptical about the war and don't think they should be suffering for it. India's foreign minister was quite vocal about this when he recently said Europe thinks Europe's problems are the world's problems. But that world's problems, more neutral countries are not so critical of Russia, or even
if there's no natural resource in a particular country that the United States is not interested in, they will allow another bully country to just straight up bully you. But countries that has, commodities, United States will go there and be the hero. But you better believe the country that they're protecting, they're getting something out of it. Now, they're not just doing that because it's a noble thing to do. That's not how the West operates.
They take a broader view of matters, and in view of American foreign policy over the years, might not see things as black and white on the good and evil front. So, when at the 14th BRICS summit in 2022, Vladimir Putin talked about creating a new international currency standard, some of them listened. They might be looking at the US's many sanctions over the decades and its somewhat coercive diplomacy and wondering if US dollar hegemony is in their best interests. The European Council on Foreign Relations said the world is divided on Ukraine. Importantly, it also wrote, people in these non-Western countries and in Russia also consider the emergence of a multipolar world order to be more probable than a bipolar arrangement. They're talking about a post-Western international order, which may mean an end to dollar hegemony. What we might now be seeing with countries foregoing the dollar is the start of this. Argentina was another country that lately announced it would start paying for Chinese imports in yuan, not dollars. The country's economy minister explained, following the worst drought in history, Argentina must keep its foreign reserves robust. In April 2023, Argentina said it was planning on paying for around $1 billion worth of imports in yuan and $790 million of monthly imports after that, also in yuan. This no doubt delighted China. Not so much the USA. While this might not have anything to do with the war, it shows how the country is strengthening its bond with China, and at the same time saying it wants less reliance on the dollar. Then you have Brazil, which the US has criticized for remaining neutral where the Ukraine war is concerned. Brazil's president, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, is not on any especially bad terms with the US, but his position on Ukraine has not exactly been in line with the US and the EU thinking. In 2023, he explained what some politicians and people in the global south have been thinking when he said NATO should not have been installing military bases that close to Russia, given the promises of the past. He criticized Western politicians for encouraging war and not doing enough to negotiate with Russia in the run-up to Ukraine's invasion. He also blamed Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky.
Negotiation means do what we tell you. That will more than likely be in the best interest of the of corporate America, not necessarily the people of America, but those warmongers who are in corporate America.
Zelensky saying he was as responsible as Putin for the war. The Ukraine foreign minister shot back, "We have to clearly note Ukraine does not trade its territories." Silva's comment obviously made some people's blood boil, but outside of the mainstream Western media, many analysts have said similar things. The British historian Geoffrey Roberts, whose specialty is Soviet diplomatic and military history, wrote in a recent paper, "Could war have been prevented by a Russian-Western deal that halted NATO expansion and..."
Now, Turkey is interested in cooperating and joining BRICS also. So that'll be another nation that's going to join the organization. That's really, their aim is to end Western dominance.
And neutralized Ukraine in return for solid guarantees of Ukrainian independence and sovereignty? Quite possibly. Many others say diplomacy was blocked by the US and UK, often citing the former US ambassador to Russia and presently the CIA director William Burns, who in a cable to Washington in 2008 warned that unpredictable and uncontrolled consequences and war could happen with the enlargement of NATO. They also might refer to Alexei Arestovich, a former military intelligence officer and former advisor to President Zelensky, who in 2019 warned, "Our price for joining NATO is a big war with Russia." Some say the US knew there would be war and went ahead anyway to weaken Russia. So some nations might be saying they will not suffer just for the US to gain more global influence. In terms of this video, it doesn't matter who's right or wrong. We're just trying to explain how some countries are thinking and the reason they might be upset with the US. They believe this war could have been prevented, and so they won't hurt for it. They're not willing to be an enemy of Russia. It's why Brazil, part of BRICS along with Russia, India, China, and South Africa, is just one of many nations that refuses to side with the US and NATO and will not agree to sanctions. Unsurprisingly, China has also talked about US hegemony and a new multipolar world. China,
again, that's one of the requirements to be a member of BRICS. You have to ban sanctions. Sanctions are banned.
It just inked trade deals in Moscow. In a joint statement, they said Russia needs a prosperous and stable China, and China needs a strong and successful Russia. They added that they intended to increase the diversity and supply of agricultural products and food exports to each other. Russia's economy, despite the sanctions, has remained strong and will very likely stay strong for some years to come. One of the reasons is China, and the fact that many deals will now be done in yuan, not dollars. Brazil will too. In 2000, China wasn't even in the top 5 trading partners with Brazil, and now it's number 1. It's the only country in the region to have hit over $100 billion in trading with China, and more deals have been made. We might now be at $150 billion. Many of these emerging economies seem to be thinking in a similar way. We hope you're starting to see a pattern here. At around the same time as Brazil and China made those deals, South Korea and Indonesia also agreed to use their respective currencies for trade. About a year later, India and Russia signed the rupee-ruble trade agreement. The US had pressured India to reduce its Russian imports under sanctions to Ukraine, and the EU prohibited trade in euro-denominated banknotes to Russia. So India was between a rock and a hard place. It chose the route out, straight down the middle. The country has been criticized, but as you know, India said Ukraine is Europe's problem. It said it's just taking care of business and its moral duty is toward its own citizens. Ukraine said India is acting immorally and adding to Ukraine's suffering. But guess who is India's biggest arms supplier by far? Russia. It supplies 70% of India's arms. There's not a chance in hell India will turn away from trade with Russia. India has already inked a new...
Especially when they're supplying those nukes. Because India do have nukes, and they get them from Russia.
bilateral payment scheme, meaning not in dollars, with the United Arab Emirates. Sticking with Asia, Bangladesh, Kazakhstan, and Laos are now in talks with China about new payment mechanisms. Malaysia, Indonesia, Singapore, and Thailand have all agreed to trade outside of the dollar. The Indonesian finance minister said in 2023 that the sanctions on Russia are a valuable lesson, saying countries will now just do transactions directly, bilaterally, using their local currencies, which he said was probably good for the world in the long run. Maybe not for the US, though. These countries don't want to choose sides. Their economies and their safety of their people, they say, might not allow them to choose sides. Like India, they might say it's easy to tell us what we have to do, but try being us. It should be said that the US's dollar brute strength of late, thanks to the US Federal Reserve raising interest rates, has also wreaked havoc in their nations, with the very poor being profoundly affected as food prices increase dramatically. In Singapore, a journalist summed this all up, saying the US dollar has become a wrecking ball. Also, when European nations found they couldn't pay for Russian energy, Russia just demanded that they do the deal in rubles. Russia supplies gas to 23 European nations. While Europe is against Russia's invasion of Ukraine, some countries obviously feel they can't live without Russian gas. Reports state that 4 countries in Europe have already started to pay in rubles, and 10 European companies have opened accounts at Gazprom Bank so they can start paying Putin's chosen currency. Can the US do anything about such an activity? Some think not. They think the US doesn't have the ability to control other nations anymore, or at least not as it had in the past. Open democracy.
I mean, the control that they had, I'm going to keep saying it, the control that they had over these nations is not through negotiations, it's through gangster tactics. The United States has they have weapons, and some people are not even allowed to develop weapons to defend their nation. And the United States say, we'll protect the nation, but you have to do this in order for us to do it. If not, we're going to allow a country that wants to attack you to attack you. And that's how they do their business.
Democracy wrote in 2023, the power of Western powers is undeniable, but it is also undeniable that the world is increasingly moving toward multipolarity. The article said that the global south will not be bullied. Many others argue that the days of do what we tell you or else are coming to an end. And
exactly, as my brother said in the chat, the global south hits different. They're not having it.
De-dollarization is proof of that. De-dollarization is certainly catching on, which has led some pundits to call this a revolt against the US and its dollar. They say weaponization of the greenback doesn't work anymore. Bloomberg reported that at least a dozen countries in Asia are experimenting with a dollar alternative. It said this was unthinkable not even that long ago. The criticism isn't just coming from outside the US. An investment strategist in the US told the Straits Times the Biden administration made an error in weaponizing the US dollar in the global payment system. That will force Now,
I am not a supporter of Biden or any other politician, left or right, but this is not narrowed down to the current president. The dollar has been weaponized for a long time. More than likely before Biden was a thought in his father's head.
Non-US investors and nations to diversify their holdings outside the traditional safe haven of the US. Another thing that's happened is countries buying gold with their dollars. They may not feel right now the dollar is their safest bet. Gold is probably safer, given they don't know what the US is going to do next.
I mean, gold is definitely a better alternative to any currency.
And inflation could be on the way. China and Turkey were the biggest buyers, with India, Qatar, and Uzbekistan also ranking highly on the list. It was the biggest gold buyout in history by central banks. In 2022, they bought 1,078 metric tons compared to 450 tons in 2021. Again, this is countries thinking the dollar is at risk. A Japanese analyst explained, gold buying by central banks is a sign that the dollar's dominance is eroding. This gold purchasing activity is expected to remain rampant as countries opt for a safer economic path. So diversity is the word on the street in economics these days, just as much as it's one of the most used words regarding cultural issues. The world's economies are...
A wise man told me years ago, sitting in his living room, that gold would be the standard. 20 plus years ago, sitting in his living room, he told me that gold would be the standard. And if you don't have some, you better get it.
Are diversifying. In evolutionary terms, they're adapting to a new environment. It's survival of the fittest. But what will these new adaptations mean for the US? Some might say that the answer to this is the same as the answer to what happens to the alpha male chimpanzee when he leads with too much violence and is often unfair to the troop. Rebellion is the answer, always violent rebellion. But is this way over the top? Is the story of rebellion and the end of the dollar being exaggerated? Don't have a panic attack.
That's what happens when greedy, warmongering people in corporate America, that's what happens when they don't get their way. That's what happens when a certain group of people don't get their way in general. It always go to the violence.
attack yet, is what we say. We call this the good news and the bad news segment of the show. Let's start with the good news for the people that don't want to see the end of the dollar as the world's reserve currency. Okay, so first of all, changing a reserve currency would take a long time. You can't just supplant the reserve currency for the simple fact that about 60% of the global foreign currency reserves are in the dollar. It took many decades for the British pound to be replaced. It would be the same with the US dollar. It's true that in 2000 the dollar was 71% of global foreign currency reserves, but 60% is still a lot more than the yuan in circulation at 2%, the euro just 21%, the yen at 6%, and the British pound at 5%. As one analyst said, changing the reserve currency would be like telling the world that the English language should be replaced as a global language. The dollar is not done. If we look at global trade throughout the entire Americas, close to 96% of trading is in the greenback. That's not going to change anytime soon. Sure, in Europe, the euro is the currency of choice, but even then, 23% of trades are executed on the dollar. As for Asia-Pacific region, 74% of trading is done using the dollar. The rest of the world, 79% of trades use the dollar. You also need to know this. In 2022, the USA bought around $3.3 trillion worth of goods from other countries, but other countries only bought $2.1 trillion from the US. That leaves what we call a trade deficit, $1.2 trillion, not pocket change. So the foreign countries are sitting with a stack of dollars. They could spend it elsewhere, maybe in China, but then they'd have to convert their USD to do that. You can also only buy stuff in the US in USD. Instead, they buy what's called the most liquid security on the planet, which is US Treasuries. Some also hold on to the cash. It's thought the world has about $7.4 trillion in these treasuries and about $1 trillion in cash, about 46% of all the dollars out there. But the US offering these treasuries is a liability, and the countries must trust in the US and its dollar, which they obviously do. No other countries, according to the experts, are willing to take on this role, and even if they thought about it, they probably wouldn't be capable. Money makes the world go round, and the dollar is the oil for the engine. Without it, the economies of the world would grind to a halt and almost get conked out. Stories about the end of the dollar have been around for decades, which tells you something about their predictive potential. The media loves a good doom story, whether it's overpopulation, all the oil running out, or the end of the dollar. It gets eyes on their product, but it doesn't mean the stories are anything close to being true. Another thing is China is always mentioned in these stories. Still, economists often point out that China's economic model, it's well known for super growth over the last 2 decades or so, depends on the US dollar being the world's reserve currency. China doesn't want this to change. It can't change if China's well-being is to stay intact. And you have to ask the question, if China was thinking about knocking the dollar off the top spot, how many countries would put their trust in a new reserve currency? Sure, the US has problems, but it's not autocratic, and it's certainly more transparent than China, which is what governments want when they're entrusting their money with a country. China also has very strict capital controls, while the US doesn't have many. This makes the dollar the better option for a reserve currency. As one economic pundit explained, for all the troubles of the West, the US and the EU are coherent actors with deeply embedded institutional structures that are difficult to replicate. Now, for the bad news. Some people say the US has overplayed its hand too many times now. It's activated the ire of too many nations, playing school ground bully one too many times.
Yep, school ground bully. And will bomb you back into the Stone Age if you are not in compliance with their foreign policy.
Internally, much of the world sees the USA as a polarized social and political mess. This is another reason why there's a lot of talk about the end of US hegemony. The ship is sinking, they say, and rather than try to fix it, they're fighting over the gold and the jewels in the hold, which no one will have if the ship goes down. The critics say US politics, society, and culture is too much us versus them rather than we. It doesn't scream stability, and other nations are taking note.
See, BRICS, they're creating a we, an alliance, not just merely aligning themselves with each other, but actually working together to, to solve all the problems and to trade and do fair, equal, clean business and trading.
There's been chatter about BRICS coming up with a common currency. More and more countries seem to be interested in joining the group, although it would be a pity to spoil that easy-to-remember acronym. The term BRICS Plus has been mulled over, but we think it sounds too much like a vitamin shake. On the BRICS waiting list are 8 countries: Algeria, Argentina, Bahrain, Egypt, Indonesia, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE. The countries thinking about joining are Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Belarus, Kazakhstan, Mexico, Nicaragua, Nigeria, Pakistan, Senegal, Sudan, Syria, Thailand, Tunisia, Turkey, Uruguay, Venezuela, and Zimbabwe. By 2050, some of these nations are expected to be economically flying. You can expect more countries in the near future to want to join. The question is, will the dollar be done by then as the global reserve currency, or will that happen much quicker? It's easy to imagine the answer is yes to the former question. Many think the BRICS common currency is coming, especially, as one analyst put it, these countries will outweigh not only the reigning hegemon, the US, but the entire G7 weight class put together. Still, that doesn't mean all you guys in the USA will be living among smoking embers of houses while running around trying to catch rats for your evening meal. One analyst argues that the dollar being replaced might not be such a bad thing for the US, given how much responsibility comes with it. He also said it seems unlikely that anytime soon this alliance will mount any profound challenge to the dollar, especially as its 2 biggest economies, India and China, can barely agree on anything. He reckons if they could, BRICS might just smash through the status quo. This means that the dollar status as the world's reserve currency is not going to change anytime soon. But, and it is a big but, a new world order is taking shape. How will that look? We can't say. But it will likely mean the US losing much of its power.
Now, this is the first BRICS meeting post-expansion.
Saudi Arabia has officially ended its 50-year petrodollar agreement with the United States, shifting to a multi-currency system for oil sales. Well, this transition allows Saudi Arabia to sell oil in various currencies. This move coincides with Saudi Arabia's participation as a guest nation at the BRICS Outreach Ministry.
Exactly, Sweet Texas. It would end all the white degeneracy, the so-called mindset of so-called white supremacy, because their currency fell. And if it's not flowing through if it's not flowing through this world like it's been doing, it's like one thing falls at a time. I welcome it. I just say that I welcome it.
Ministerial meeting in Russia. Well, BRICS now comprising 10 full members, including Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Iran, UAE, and Ethiopia. And they all are pushing for greater use of local currencies in foreign trade and financial transactions. BRICS meeting held for the first time since the group's expansion in 2023 emphasized the requirement for reforms in international.
Look at all this representation on this stage. All these people coming together to end Western dominance. This is what happened when you're the world bully. I've always said, eventually, the bully gets jumped and get dealt with.
National financial institutions, including the IMF. Meanwhile, both China and Russia, both these countries have called out the West for building walls and disrupting global trade.
Mic check, mic check.
It
is not us who divide the world into different blocks. We have never.
I have a question that's a little off the subject. How did mic check become a universal way of checking the mic all over the world when it started with hip hop? Just a question.
Claim to punish those who do not agree with our position. But the West is doing just that. Western countries do not want to build bridges. They use the BRICS to build walls or to strike down those who do not obey them. I have already said that it is not us who isolate ourselves from the West. The West should be aware that their actions will lead to continuous confrontation and offer no way out.
Exactly.
The BRICS ministers also focused on strengthening the new bank The ministers aim to expand the NDB's membership and enhance its capacity to support member states in achieving the development goal and climate action initiatives as well.
This is the final video of this evening, and this is the requirement for BRICS to be a member.
Countries wishing to join BRICS must not engage in unilateral sanctions, according to Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov. But at a Moscow press conference, he highlighted this as a principal criteria for BRICS membership, particularly emphasizing the prohibition of sanctions against any current BRIC members, especially Russia. Russia's statement comes as BRICS, a bloc originally comprising Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, continues to grow. Recently, BRICS expanded by including Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, and the UAE, now collectively known as BRICS Plus. This expansion underscores the bloc's increasing influence and its desire to promote a multilateral global economic order at this point of time. The significance of this statement lies in the geopolitical and economic landscape it helps shape. BRICS, with its growing membership, aims to counterbalance Western-dominated institutions like the IMF and the World Bank. By insisting on non-participation in unilateral sanctions, BRICS positions itself as a champion of sovereignty and non-interference, appealing to countries frustrated with Western economic pressures and sanctions. The economic implications of BRICS expansion and its anti-sanction stance are significant. Number one, it strengthens the group's bargaining power on the global stage.
No ganging up on other nations and putting sanctions and embargoes on them. No ganging up on other nations. No interference. No sanctions. This is the requirement of being a member of BRICS.
Particularly in trade negotiations and the international economic forums as well. As more countries join BRICS, the bloc's collective economic output and market size increases, enhancing its influence over global economic policies. Moreover, for countries joining BRICS, the anti-sanctions policy offers protection against the economic fallout from Western sanctions. There's particularly appealing for nations like Iran and Russia, which have faced extensive sanctions from the West. Well, in summary, BRICS' condition for new members to issue unilateral sanctions signals its commitment to fostering an alternative economic order. This policy not only strengthens internal unity, but also attracts countries seeking to avoid the repercussions of Western economic sanctions, thereby reshaping the global economic landscape.
I want to thank everyone who have tapped in this evening. I appreciate it. We're going to get more information on this, and I'm going to do my research on the information I received in the chat this evening. I will bring that information. I will do my research and bring that information to the platform with a live stream. But before I go, I want to thank the true daughter of darkness, my brother and comrade, Talk Your Talk Media, Sister Sharon Walker, my brother and comrade, Epic Studies, Lady Shea Butter, Sweet Texas. Make sure I'm not Sharon Walker. Make sure I'm not forgetting anyone. And my brother and comrade, Kill Switch, my brother and comrade, Ghetto Child Clinic, my brother and comrade, Big Dog Filio G. I want to thank you all for joining me this evening, tapping in, and going back and forth with the information. Again, this is your brother Nasir. Thanks for joining me this evening. This is the Enemy's Public. Until next time, peace.